What if I told you that the worst thing you can do on Football Manager 26 is the exact same thing that every meta tactic tells you to do? You see, for years, I thought that the best mentality of Football Manager is positive, attacking, very attacking, sometimes balanced. Of course, the more the better, the more attacking you are, the better, right? It turns out that that mindset, that belief system almost destroyed my entire season. I've tested almost every mentality, balanced, attacking, very attacking. They all have one thing in common. The more attacking you go, the higher your tempo, the less control you have over your team. You may also score less goals, you may also create less quality chances, but mostly you have less control over your team. Now for me, balanced mentality is okay. But once you start pushing the slider to attacking and very attacking or even positive sometimes, your players almost stop thinking. They almost stop evaluating their chances, their options. You see them taking shots from wild positions, making rash decisions in the game that just doesn't make sense. But here's the thing, that's exactly how mentality works on Football Manager. Defensive mentality restricts your team's creativity and forces you to stay in a defensive shape. This is safe, sometimes a bit too safe. Attacking mentalities, however, they do the complete opposite. You encourage your team to push bodies forward, demand them to take a bit more risk, and to be honest with you, in FM26 your players will take shots from angles that will almost make you unplug your computer and just uninstall Football Manager completely. But most meta tactics love the attacking mentality, even in FM26. But there's one reality I've experienced when playing the game that nobody really talks about. When your team is told to go attacking and try to score goals, your players start to ignore some very obvious opportunities, like a clear-cut pass to the striker. They just try to go for goal for some reason. The way the game is programmed, your team is wired to take decisions really quickly, especially if you're playing on attacking. The tempo is going to be much higher, so your players will likely not think. They will just go ahead and do the decision because high tempo means they will faster. Thankfully, Football Manager has given us a new update that will go ahead and fix the way the wingers normally go ahead and take shots from possible angles. But to be honest with you, I do expect that in the new update, that thing is still going to continue, even though it didn't be like used to it. They will still try to do it. So if you want to have control over your players, it's best to adopt a slightly different mentality. So what's the best mentality of Football Manager 26? For me, it's not attacking, it's not positive, it's not very attacking. It's a fine line between balanced and cautious mentality. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I have a strong preference for the cautious mentality. Here's why. Both the cautious mentality and the balanced mentality allow your team to make rational decisions. Your team is likely to follow your instructions and the players are likely to play to their player roles. Rather than go for a goal when they're in an attacking mentality, if you're playing balance, your team will likely pick a pass rather than shoot when you ask them to pick a pass rather than shoot. With this, you also have a higher chance of increasing your XG as your team is going to be more calculative in their decision making and also go ahead and try to make clear-cut chances. You will have clear-cut chances. With Leeds United, I made the mistake of starting with an attacking mentality. Of course, we're the best team in the championship to me, even though we were predicted to finish in 4th place. I felt Leeds United being relegated from the Premier League were one of the best teams in the championship, right? That was a big mistake. When I went for attacking, we were so wide open, our defense was nothing to write home about. We were conceding goals and we're not creating clear-cut chances, we're not scoring that many goals. It was just chaos in defense. The moment I switched to cautious, everything changed. But honestly, I started off with balanced mentality before I had to go all the way down to cautious. The cautious mentality came against Sheffield United. I kept my instructions the same, but then I went on to use the cautious mentality and I noticed that my team was dominating possession against Sheffield. I was like, were we not playing cautious? We were, and I noticed that cautious may not always mean defensive. It's just that your team is a bit more calculative in what they're doing. They're not. They're very cautious of what the opposition is about to do, so they make rational decisions. This led us to create high quality chances in the match, and we ended up beating Sheffield United, and they were top of the league. We were somewhere in mid-table, I think like 10th or so. In the league, we climbed all the way from the mid-table to the promotion places. In the Carabao Cup, we went on to beat Spurs, we beat West Ham, and we also beat Chelsea. Now we have a game coming up against Arsenal. So what happened to my beloved Leeds United? Did the squad magically improve? No. We just stopped using the attacking mentality all the time and stopped my players from rushing into decisions. Here's my truth. Cautious mentality to me is one of the best mentalities on FM26. The balanced mentality works too. But you see, positive and attacking mentality, I will reserve those mentalities for situations where you're absolutely sure that you're going to win the game, or you absolutely need a goal in that moment, and you're sure that if you do not get a goal, there's no point of you actually playing the match. Then you go ahead and switch to attacking. I recommend that you use attacking sparingly, so your opposition is not going to be used to you always playing attacking and then they'll go into a defensive block And trust me on FM26, their defending is so good this year, it's almost annoying to watch. So when you're all the time attacking and then your position is in a low block and they just get the ball and hit you on a counter attack, it's heartbreaking, to be honest. So I do recommend playing balance so you're not overly attacking. But to make it clear, let me show you the tactic that I went on to use with Leeds United. With Leeds United, I already had to take a step back and look at my game tactically and try to understand how Football Manager 26 tactic works, because if you've been following the channel for a while now, you notice that I haven't made that many tactic videos for FM 26, and even at that, the few ones I've made, there was a time that I actually told you guys that I got sacked at Newcastle, then I got a job at Cambridge. That was where the new tactic actually came from. And what I've noticed is that in Football Manager, if you don't really play the game like in depth, you may miss out on a lot of stuff. So when I got the job at Leeds, my priority was just to understand Football Manager 26 tactics and how they work, which is why I came up with most of what I've learned, and I'm going to share that with you. What happened with Leeds was that I had to first of all look at my recruitment. When I joined the club, what was happening at the club at the time was that most of my players were unhappy. In fact, some of them are still unhappy at the moment. You can see the system that we're using here. We're going to get to the tactic really soon. First of all, I had to sort out my backroom, sort out the players, because if you have unhappy players in your camp, it's not just going to work regardless of the tactics that you're using. So I had to just agree with some players that they were going to leave the club. And the next thing that I did was to look at my recruitment, which is where I started learning Moneyball and how to go about stat-based recruitment. It helped me get some good players in. I brought in Jose Sarr. I brought in another player in, what's his name, Mateo Mendoza. And if you look at even Marius Wolf, ended up joining the club at some point, and some other players as well. I think William Osula was one player that I also brought in, and Calvert-Lewin was already there. I had to work a way to make it work for Calvert-Lewin, the tactic to make it work for Calvert-Lewin, and it did, and I'm going to share it with you. After we got our recruitment, we can go into the tactics screen. In case you're figuring out how recruitment actually works on stat-based recruitment, I actually wanted to make a video about that. I'm going to link in the description, or maybe a link to the playlist of all the players that you can actually look at their attributes and their stats, or looking at them based on stats to help you find those players. We'll talk about that much later. But the tactic for Leeds United, this is the system that I went for, and what you're seeing on screen here is the cautious version of the tactic, and this is the system that I've used the most with Leeds United. It is really integral that you look at the players that are playing on the field. The first group I'm going to talk about is my goalkeeper. First of all, I brought in Jose Sarr. He hasn't played as often as John Victor, but John Victor is quite good. So I normally use Jose Sarr for most of the cup games, and he has been doing fantastically well. But for my goalkeeper, I went for a standard goalkeeper on both sides, both in and out of possession. Now, speaking of in and out of possession, if you look at my way my team is set up in possession, we're playing in a 4-3-3 with two defensive midfielders, one central midfielder that is an attacking midfielder, a channel forward, and two wide players. And then out of possession, it is the exact same formation. The reason why I did this is because I've tried different ways of Football Manager. We're using a 4-3-3 here, and out of possession you're playing a 4-4-2, or using a 4-2-3-1, and out of possession you're playing a 4-3-3. Most of this stuff didn't work out for me. I'm going to be really honest with you. It did not work out for me. I've been struggling with this game more than most people, and I think I've played the game in depth. I'm really not skipping so many. I'm actually playing through the matches. And what I've noticed is that when you're picking your formation, you want to pick a formation out of possession with reference to the fact that your team is going to lose possession at some point. When your team loses possession, you want to make sure that your players are in the right positions in possession, so that when you're out of possession, you're not too drawn out of position. I don't know how to, let me try and explain that again. If a player, like you have a winger here in Hudson-Odoi, let me use the team instructions. I think this is going to be better. If you're looking at the team visualizer right now, this is the way my team is set up in possession. When we are in possession in the opposition's final third, this is how my players are going to look. So my out of possession formation should be in such a way that my players would likely be in proximity to their positions and will not have much distance to cover when they're going into their out of possession positions. That's like the simplest way to put it. So now that is also going to affect the way you're going to select your player roles. So if you look back on the tactic now, looking at the team shape, out of possession, I have my fullbacks playing both as pressing fullbacks. Now, pressing fullbacks, the game will tell you that you cannot do this. You cannot have two pressing fullbacks. You cannot have a one pressing defensive midfielder and one pressing central midfielder. where you see that in the team advice, go over to advice, tactical evaluation, and out of possession, you can see that my assistant manager is screaming that I have so many players on pressing roles, but it works. If I'm to follow my assistant manager's advice, I'll just start losing games. I was losing games, so I had to just ignore what he was saying. Pressing fullback on both sides. Why? When my team is out of possession, or when my team is in possession and we are in the final third, and we lose possession of the ball, this is where Renan Lodi is, and this is where my other fullback in Clark. This ideally can be an inside wing back, depending on the player. Let me go ahead and make that tweak right now. I'm using Clark here because my normal player Ramsey, where's Ramsey? Ramsey is injured at the moment. Where is he? Kenan Ramsey. Okay. Kenan Ramsey is supposed to be the one here, and he plays as an inside wing back. So that is Ramsey's role. Now, in our team instructions when we're in possession in the final third, this is where Ramsey is. He's in the center of the pitch. Ramsey cannot be a holding fullback or a normal fullback. He is in a position to press the opposition. And that is why I went on to select pressing fullback. Now, in case the ball is played out wide, Renan Lodi is going to deal with that because he's going to be playing as a pressing fullback. So when I went about picking my player roles, it was with this in mind. When my players are in attacking positions and we lose possession, we will still likely be in our in possession shape. So choosing player roles that will engage your position early was very useful. So that's why I went for my out of possession roles to be pressing fullbacks on both sides. My centre backs are pretty basic, normal centre backs. When we're in possession, both of them are ball play centre backs. Now I want Ramsey to be in the centre, so he's playing as an inside wing back. Ronaldo is going to be a bit more adventurous, so he's going to get ahead. He has the attributes to do that, so that's what he's going to do. When it comes to the defensive midfield position here, I went for Gruev and Stark, but the roles are the box-to-box midfielder, this and the defensive midfielder to kind of protect the defense. So essentially, it's still a 4-3-3 with one DM because the box-to-box midfielder is going to be way up. So if you look at the way the team is set up in possession, this is where we are. So we have one DM and one box-to-box and one attacking midfielder on this other side. That is the way it's going to be shaped up. So it's kind of why we went for what we did. Now, having a box-to-box player here, if you look at the player's description, it says that this player here is he's a goal threat and he's going to end up in the attacking midfield position. So that is why, even though he's playing in DM, he's going to be way up here. If you look at his instruction when he's out of possession, he's going to be a pressing defensive midfielder because I know that when we are in possession at this point here, the box-to-box midfielder will need to have a pressing role to engage the opposition when they are in possession of the ball to help us win the ball high up the pitch. That is what sort of created my relationship between out of possession roles and in possession roles. So if you look at the other roles now, the two guys that I have left are the two wide players. When it comes to wide players, what I did for the inside winger and the wide forward on the right hand side, what the assistant manager would normally do is to start the game like this: Hudson-Odoi on the left hand side, Nyonto on the right. It didn't work out for us in game. I have to manually change this every single game. Before I go into the match, if I go ahead and do a quick pick right now, the assistant manager is going to obviously, okay, look at what he's doing. He's bringing in Clark. I would rather have Ramsey, but he goes on to pick Hudson-Odoi and Nyonto. But Hudson-Odoi is preferable to play on the right hand side because he's a right wide forward, and Nyonto is better off playing as an inside winger. Now, the game would not tell you that if you do quick pick, you have to actually select the player roles yourself and drag the players where you want them to be, because during the match, Nyonto performs better on the left-hand side, coming in from that side and shooting. So the last role here is Dominic Calvert-Lewin's role, which is the channel forward. Now, ideally, the reason why I went for the channel forward for Calvert-Lewin as opposed to the normal target forward was because he could run into the near post area here and kind of just latch onto crosses that were whipped from the right hand side, and then he's just going to score a simple tap-in. I've seen him score a lot of tap-ins. I think that helped us a whole lot. Channel forward sort of worked best, and for me, it's a role that not only Calvert-Lewin can play this role, I can also have Szymanski in here, which is the player that is deputizing for Calvert-Lewin right now that Calvert-Lewin is injured. I also used a Moneyball stats-based siding approach to bring in Szymanski. Szymanski was a player that would not have turned up on my radar at all. You can see most of his aggression and positioning and work rate is really low, but based on stats, this guy delivers. He actually plays well. So I use stats to help me find this guy is a Belarusian striker, Artem Szymanski, and he's also very good playing on the right hand side as well. So I brought him in. He's still costing like 10 million, but what I've seen this guy actually play, he's quite good. So having that role, knowing that Szymanski can play in this role, Osula can play in this role, what is other guys, and there's a Spanish striker that I have here at Leeds, Mateo Joseph, can also play that role, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is the one that is leading the line. So that is how I went about creating a system that is going to work for us, playing that cautious mentality. The one role here that I also see is the central attacking midfielder. Normally in my main tactic, this could be a midfield playmaker. Puskás is in here, but normally it's supposed to be Ayo Tanaka. Tanaka is also a very good defensive midfielder. So what I used to do in game is sometimes when Tanaka is fully fit and then one of my defensive midfielders are getting tired, usually it's Gruev, I take off Gruev and bring on Tanaka, or drag Tanaka back to the box-to-box midfield role, and then bring on Brandon Aronson to play as the attacking midfielder. So you have to do a lot of tweaking. You can't just throw your players onto the pitch with the same tactic and expect it to always work. You have to actually play the game. And for me, it has become really, really immersive. Now, before we forget, team instruction is another important thing. What I notice when you're playing cautious mentality is that you see this high tempo here. This is default until I start the match. The moment I start the game and the first 10 minutes, and this is that we do not have control over the match, I dial it all the way down to lower tempo and just keep the passing on standard. If it's still getting wasteful, I switch it down to low tempo and shorter passing, and then we try to control the game there. All the while playing with a cautious mentality. Even our creative freedom, with your cautious mentality, the creative freedom is going to be a bit more controlled, or you can put it on balance if your team is too wasteful. Having creative freedom on expressive is also what is encouraging your strikers to take shots when they're not supposed to take shots. Most of these things sort of contribute, but the one that really contributes the most, what I've noticed, is putting it on much higher tempo. If you have your team playing on much higher tempo, your strikers are just going to randomly shoot all the time. Now, it's not a bad thing. If you want to go meta, you can might as well just go meta. But me, I do not think that the much higher tempo is a meta on Football Manager 26. From what I've used, from what I've experienced playing the game, it does more harm than good to my team. For a different team, it might actually work out for you guys. But for this system that I've noticed where you have control over the players, you need to reduce the tempo a little bit so that you see what your players are actually doing. If they are rushing into things, there's no control. You can lose the ball. Losing possession is going to happen so often if you're playing with much higher tempo. Out of possession, I kept the pressing on high press, but let the defensive line understand that. So there's the matter of if you should randomly always press the opposition or not press them. In FM26, I've noticed that if you can't win possession of the ball back, you don't need to aggressively press the opposition all the time. Teams are very good at keeping possession of the ball this year, so having much more often trigger press all the time may just tire out your players and you may not really get the ball. You can also move your players out of position unnecessarily, and you do not want that to happen. You do not want to be caught out of position and then the opposition just plays through you and then goes on to go ahead and score a goal. I know you've seen often in the game where you have more often pressing and your team is not still doing anything. So what I noticed best was just to leave it a more often pressing, not much more often pressing. And then because we're playing on a cautious mentality, my team is not going to press as aggressively as most teams would normally press. It allows us to keep a shape and stay sane, but we still have get stuck in turn-down. Sometimes I kind of move this off a bit if I notice that I'm getting too many yellow cards and I don't want to finish the game with 10 men, I turn it off. But this is just the way we're going to have to set up. Most of what happens in the game, you have to actually watch the matches and make sure it works out for you. You can't just really expect the team is going to always play well if you're not watching what is going on and then assume that your system is not working. You have to consider your team as well. If you go ahead and create a tactic, make sure it suits the team that you're managing, not that you're giving a player a role that he's not comfortable playing and then expecting him to work magic. It doesn't really work out that way. But I've noticed that cautious mentality is a mentality that allows you to have control over your team and tell them to do what they're supposed to do, and then they won't go ahead and try something else. They won't be so expressive and then try many random shots and forget that they're supposed to try and create clear-cut chances. This is why I feel that cautious mentality is the best Football Manager mentality, especially on FM26.